Corks one into right, down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy. There's the drive. Way back. It might be. It could be. Playing a high drive into left. Back towards the creek. He's at the track. He has it. He's the former world champion for 2011.
A little bouncer slowly toward Bryant. He will glove it, go to Rizzo. It's in time, and the Chicago Cubs win the World Series.
This is the Team of Rivals podcast. No insiders, no anonymous sources, just passionate analysis from the bleacher seats. Here are your hosts.
Well, hello, Cubs and Cardinals fans. We're back this week. This time, going on. There we go. We stopped it. And bringing in Elliott. There he is. Just Elliott and I this week because Ron is still out on walkabout. Brecklyn Carey is studying for her LSATs. But we've got our pop culture buddy on the show this week. Adam Maurer joining us from Los Angeles. How you doing, Adam?
Hello, I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on again.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We love having you on. And just so you know, this is probably killing Brecklyn right now because when she found out how close we were with you and all the jokes we've made about being in your next project, her eyes lit up. So I can only imagine how much she is going to die when she listens to this episode, knowing that she's missing out on her opportunity to advertise and flaunt her wares for you.
There's always more opportunities.
Good to know. Hey, Elliott, how you been the last week, man?
Hey, man. Baseball's back. We are into regular season. It's no longer these games that don't count. Every run counts now. Every hit counts. Every robbed home run counts. So it's all great. It's all gravy. So.
Yeah, I'm going to need a minute to get that one out. Hold on.
All right, let's jump right into it. Actually, before we hit opening day, and let's not lose that aspect of this. It's opening day. We had both teams have played. It's what a great start. But before we jump into that, let's wrap up a couple of loose ends that developed in spring training, just as we wrapped last week's show. First and foremost, Elliott, this was when both ends of this caught us off guard. Ian Happ demoted, and Ryan Dunsing outrighted. He was waived the last time we saw, and what was it, yesterday? He cleared waivers. Man, that is, I tell you, if Theo was looking for a better way to reinforce the message that he had stated that they were no longer going to judge on potential, but instead on production, that's it.
So Ian Happ was the big shocker, I think, to me. Unbelievable. After starting off the 2017 season with the home run and then coming into the next year being demoted to AAA. I mean, I know he had options, and I know some of these other guys had good springs, but holy smokes, man. I know the reports came out that he didn't take the demotion well. He was very upset, and I figured, I mean, you got to think that, I was on the big league club all year last year, and now I'm being sent back to AAA. But like you said, Theo had said this is going to be a results-driven team. This is not going to be about your potential. So if you aren't going to perform, then you are either going to be on the bench or you're going to be sent to Iowa. And after as many strikeouts as he has had the last two seasons in his league average defense, which that's not why he's on the team, honestly, it really only made sense to send him to Iowa to get it figured out, the holes in his swing. And it was said a few times by other people, he's got a hole in his swing or he's got holes in his swing. He needs to get it figured out.
Adam,
So
anyone from the Cardinals, at least within recent memory, who hit 39 home runs in his first 2 seasons and then was sent down to the minors?
Ooh. I mean, not off the top of my head, but it does sound like Theo is a little bit of a Mike Matheny advocate because it sounds exactly the way.
Uh-oh. Am I the only one on now? Hello?
Confidence. I mean, it's Mike Matheny ball, man. You know.
Yep, I agree.
Did you lose me?
If I was a Cubs fan, I would be really pissed right now because that's not what you want to hear your guys saying. We don't care about how good you're going to be or might be. What are you doing right now? And it's like, well, if you've already proven yourself in the AAA, like Tyler O'Neill or, you know, an Ian Happ, or, I mean, my God, why would you? It just doesn't send a good message to your players, and I think it creates more angst around. I mean, what do you think Ian Happ's going to be saying to those minor leaguers that he's playing with? It's like, well, I should be up there and I'm down here, so what do you think they're going to do to you?
Well, I don't think it's like that. I mean, he struck out a lot, and there was something going on there. I mean, he did, but the feeling was that I guess the feeling that Schwarber's on base percentage was still really good though, even though he did strike out. He was still getting on base at about a 400 clip. He was taking his walk still. Happ wasn't. He wasn't taking walks, and he was striking out a lot. I hope, as they said, that hopefully this will be good for him. He'll get his at-bats, because the worst thing that can happen is he rides the bench and he's getting 1 or 2 starts a week. So that doesn't allow him to figure out what's going on with his swing and to fix it. Being down at AAA, he'll be the everyday player, and he'll be able to get those swings in that he needs against live pitching, and try and fix what's wrong with it. And you know what? Mark Zagunis played his ass off this spring to make the team, and good for him. I mean, the guy's a good defender, and he takes his walks, and from the spring, it looks like, he takes good at bats and is patient. And you know what? That's a lot of what the Cubs can get back to, because that's what they were doing in 2016 when they won the World Series, is they were patient at the plate. They took the pitches that came to them, and they swung at pitches when the pitcher made a mistake. And looking at, watching today's game of what I could, it looked like that's kind of what they're trying to get back to.
Well, yeah, they had 8 walks.
Yeah.
And how many home runs? I mean, this was an all-around effort. This is the kind of thing that you want to see. But let's hold off on that. We will get to that in a minute.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but to go back to what Elliott was saying, I really do feel like, baseball is 90% mental and 10% everything else. So, I mean, if you got your GM coming out and saying, hey, it's what can you do right now, or what have you done for me lately, not what can you do and what do you bring to the table, I think it sends the wrong message to not just Ian Happ, but everybody in the minors. It's like, well, you're going to be playing with that, someone looking over your shoulder all the time. We see how that goes in St. Louis. I mean, you get a guy who believes in your players and it's like, hey, you're my guy. And if you don't have room for him, I get it. But I don't see why Ian Happ shouldn't be the starting second baseman right now.
Because David Bodie's your starting second baseman today.
How did he do? I didn't get to check the box score.
Yeah, Bodie played solid. I mean, the Cubs defense was solid. There were no errors. He went 2 for 4 with 2 runs scored.
Yeah.
So do you guys both prefer Bodie over
He's
Ian
a
Happ?
much defensively. He's a much better second baseman than Ian Happ is.
Yeah, and second base isn't Bodie's natural position either. The kid can play. He can actually play short. He's a very good third baseman, though. He's got a nice, strong arm. Second has been new to him. I think I read that he after the season he went down to Arizona, or he played in like the fall league or the late fall league or whatever it is that they have, that goes on during the wintertime. And he was getting time at second base down there to increase his versatility. So no, Bodie.
Oh, well, Bodie can play pretty much anywhere in the infield now. And I think he was also playing in the outfield in spring, just trying to give himself, again, as much versatility as possible.
Yeah, I think he was playing some left field.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so since we're talking about handling teams and everything, Adam, you had suggested this as we were talking before the show. You mentioned that you had some thoughts on how the Cardinals have managed the rotation this year in contrast to previous years. Why don't you expand on that?
Yeah. So I was actually really surprised. I actually looked today for the first time to see who were going to be the starting, how the rotation was going to look, because originally the projections and everything were way off. I mean, you got Miles Michaelis pitching first. I get it. He's our ace now. I still think Flaherty is the best. Flaherty's going second. Dakota Hudson, PCL pitcher of the year last year, 13-3 in 19 starts before he came up and then pitched in 26 games for us. Now, you got him at number 3, and then surprisingly, you got Walker and Wainwright filling out the bottom of the rotation at 4 and 5. In my opinion, if Matheny was the coach this year, it would most likely be Michaelis, Wainwright, then Walker, then Flaherty, and then Hudson. There's no way that Hudson would be pitching 3 in this rotation if Matheny was the coach. It just wouldn't be. And Dexter Fowler would have hit second today instead of 6th. So no way. I think that everything out of spring training you've heard, I've seen and read is all about Mike Shildt is a Cardinal guy. He is a part of the Cardinal way. He's been coaching for, like 9 or 10 years in the minor league system with the Cardinals. So never played baseball at any kind of professional level, but he just knows the game really well. But I think that mentally he's so capable of communicating to his players and letting them not have a long leash, but being able to communicate, look, this is what we expect. This is your job. As long as you do that job, you're fine. You can go on an 0 for 10 stretch and not worry about somebody taking your job, because in reality, there's really no one else here. I mean, you look at Jerko, you look at all these other players that could be starting position players in, say Pittsburgh or Cincinnati, but not the Chicago Cubs or St. Louis Cardinals, right? But Shildt, I think Shildt just has a way of handling situations in a way that Matheny just wasn't able to, because I don't know, maybe because he played the game and he was a catcher and he thinks that every manager, I guess, thinks that they know right, but you make poor choices, and Matheny made poor choice after poor choice. And even though we lost today, you saw a shift in the way that the Cardinals are doing things and the way that they're playing. The players are happy. They're excited. Wong hit 2 bombs. It's a good way to start the season, even though you get a loss. It's like we talked about earlier. It's only the first game, and it was like right down to the last out. And if Bader catches that, ball that barely got out of center field against Yelich, it's a different game. So one missed robbery and then one to end the game. So it was a really great game played, and I think Shildt is going to have a lot of games like that with the way that he manages.
Let me ask you something, Adam. Do you think that it's also a commentary on Shilt's confidence or lack thereof in the long-term health of Wainwright and Walker, that he moved Hudson ahead of him?
Look, as opposed to what Theo said about, projecting, I think they know what they have in Hudson and Flaherty, and I think if you look at it, Flaherty and Hudson are going to be here for just as long as Michael is now, bearing any injuries. But if you look at that, the only two pitchers I see on this lineup, and after the next 5 years plus from now, it's going to be Flaherty and Hudson at the top of the rotation, probably fighting to be the ace. They both are very talented. They're gritty. They get into it. They feed off of each other, but they just have that. They have that X factor about being a pitcher. It's like John Lester. It's the way that Hendry is the way that when you give that guy the ball, he wants to go out there for 9 innings. I'm not saying they're Lester or Scherzer, but they have that mentality, and I think that they have the confidence behind their coach that they're going to be allowed to grow and through some pains as well. I don't think that they're going to be amazing this year, but I think the Cardinals could have 3 pitchers this year that win 15 games.
Well, not if Miles Michaelis continues to pitch the way that he did today.
I was going to ask you, does it give you concern? Does it give you concern, Adam, that Michaelis pitched the way he did today?
But I mean, I don't know. Just you look at the rotation, you look at the lineup, you look at the players in the lineup, you look at the roster construction and the rotation and the way that he ran it. He opted not to have an extra reliever and have an extra position player. I don't know how long that'll last, but I think that Schilt is going to do things not necessarily his way. I think he's going to be more cooperative or more fluid when he speaks with John Mozeliak and his players, and I think that he's going to be absolutely honest. And he doesn't have anybody who's like, hey, I need you to come in here and tell me who's messing around, who's not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's like they're all adults. He has personal one-on-one conversations with every player, and he told Dexter Fowler, you're going to be hitting 6th if it's just like anything else. If you're not hitting and if you don't have a good reputation over the last year that Dexter hasn't, why would you put him at the number 2? How can you justify that? And I think that a lot of the things are going to be him just not being a better coach than Matheny, but I think just not allowing himself to get in his own way, if that makes sense. I think he's going to allow players to kind of dictate what he does and doesn't do.
Aaron Mullins just chimed in, and I think he makes a good point. He said Michaelis pitched fine. The ball was flying today. He missed a couple spots. And that was pretty clear. All the scoring came on home runs today for both teams. So this wasn't limited to Miles Michaelis, but, definitely not the kind of performance that you want to see from your ace in game 1. Not that Julius Chassin did much better, other than the fact that he actually did hit a home run. But, he only went, I think it was 5 1/3 innings. And gave up 4 runs, so it wasn't exactly great.
No, but Miles had a really bad outing. He had a rough outing, I should say, not terrible, but he had a really rough outing in his first start last year, and then he went on like a 7-0 run. So I mean, when you're a big league pitcher, you're constantly looking into like, am I ahead of the count? Am I behind the count? Am I going down and in, down? Like all these different things, and then, like you said, missing location. How many of those were calls by Molina, and how many calls were Michaelis not hitting the location? We'll never know, but still, it just seems like it's the first game of the year, and yeah, I would have liked to have won it. It was really, really close. If it would have been 5-0, I'd probably be, feeling a little bit different about Michaelis, but the offense was there, and especially from the bottom part of the lineup. Unfortunately, nothing from the top, and I do mean nothing. 0 for 11 with 1 walk in the first 3 spots for the Cardinals. That's just, I won't say embarrassing because it's baseball, that happens, but it's not a way to start the season, in my opinion, and hopefully tomorrow will be better.
Absolutely agree. Although I think we can all agree that if the Brewers want to keep marching Josh Hader out for 2-inning appearances while Jefferson and Knebel are gone, that is absolutely fine with me. Pitch him till his arm falls off.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's what he kind of did last year going into the playoffs. You know what I mean? So, which is why Hader wasn't effective or used. I mean, it was just, you can't do that. And I don't think Counsell is, look, I wouldn't do any better, but judging by how he's doing this, he's still a new manager relatively. And I think that's where you can kind of differentiate between, look, Madden is seasoned. He knows when to push and when to lay off. I think Counsell is still, lead pedal, like, metal to the pedal. He's got his foot all the way down. every game counts. But when Hader's not available, you're probably going to start changing your tune. And then with Schill, it's like, well, we'll see what we have that night, and we'll go with the best option.
Sounds like Schilt is somewhere in between Craig Counsell and pre-2019 Joe Madden.
God, I hope so.
Because Joe is definitely, no big deal. We'll win it tomorrow. Pedal never hit the metal a couple of times, particularly if they had already won the first 2 games of a series.
Well, if you've been
Right.
coaching for 30 years, you're probably going to be a little bit more laid back.
Yeah, absolutely. We had talked about Michaelis a lot here, and so that kind of leads into something that we had discussed a little bit and before the show, and it was the Kyle Hendricks extension. I think that there's a little bit of a comp there because Michaelis is pitching. This is his, I believe, age 30 season. Hendricks is 29. They both received some big money extensions, a little bit more obviously for Michaelis. But Hendricks with a little bit more of an established record in MLB, you kind of know what to expect from him. But Michaelis, he's got really one solid year in Major League Baseball, and he got a huge extension a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know, Elliott, let's throw it to you first. How are you feeling about Hendricks getting extended?
Love it. I love it, because of what Hendricks does and how solid he always and usually is. Team friendly contract. I think it's fantastic. I'm glad that they locked him up. I know he gets compared to Greg Maddux all the time because he doesn't throw, 95 miles per hour. He is a perfectionist. He hits his spots. He throws. He might top out at 89 if he actually puts a little bit into his fastball, but usually he's about 88. And he hits his spots, man. He picks on the corners, and he's a solid pitcher. So I think it's fantastic, and I'm glad we locked him up for the next few years.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think that a little bit of it is kind of that missing Maddox,
Mm-hmm.
and wishing that we could have Greg Maddux back, and so this is, I think, for a lot of Cubs fans, their attempt to make up for that. They kind of feel like we lost Maddux, but we have Kyle Hendricks.
All right. Oh, I see that Ron is listening right now. This is for Ron.
Adam, how are you? Because we haven't spoken with you in a while. How did you feel about the extension for Miles Michaelis?
It made sense. It's definitely a Cardinal thing to do. I think that he had an extremely good year in it. I kind of comp it comparable to a Lance Lynn, only instead of letting him walk, after his first season winning 18 games, and I think he won another 2 years of 15 and started to decline after that. So if we can get 14 to 15 wins with, losses in the high 10, anything under 10 and 14 wins or above, I think it's a victory. But I think he reminds me more of a Lance Lynn, where he's got that mentality of going out there and going as long as he can and giving as much as he can every inning, every start. So in that, I like it. However, when I first saw, because I also noticed on my phone when Kendricks got the deal, I was like, oh shit, we could have signed him. We could have given him that money. We would have given him that money. Shit, we probably would have given him more.
Yeah, but based on the Jason Hayward precedent, he wouldn't have necessarily accepted more.
Maybe. But
I think that I think there's a little bit more leeway with Michaelis, and this may be why he got more per year than Hendricks did, is that Michaelis has a little bit more play because he has more velocity. Hendricks has no margin for error when it comes to Michaelis. And And so if he loses any velocity, his fastball approaches his changeup and his off-speed stuff too much, and so there's a little bit more time for hitters to key off of him, and so he has to rely on extreme control. Whereas it would appear that Michaelis has a little bit more margin for error because he has a little bit more velocity on his fastball. I could be wrong. I'll accept that.
I mean, honestly, to go back to the Michaelis and Hendricks kind of comps, if you look at what Miles Michaelis did over in Japan for the last 3 seasons, and you compare that to Shohei Ohtani, and you look at Shohei Ohtani's stuff, they're not similar in stuff or clout, but they did pitch against the same things. They are similar in a sense of mentality in the way. And look, if you look at Shohei Ohtani last year and Miles Michaelis, who was the better pitcher? It was clearly Michaelis.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he pitched the whole season. He didn't get hurt, fortunately. Knocking on wood now, but he won 18 games. Ohtani, I don't know if Ohtani will ever be able to stay healthy doing both jobs. So, I mean, you look at what LA spent on Shohei, and you look at what it took for the Cardinals just to get Michaelis here, and then they extend him. Michaelis could end up having a better career statistically than Shohei Ohtani.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that at all.
Yeah, but how many bombs did Michaelis hit last year?
That year, as of right now, it's Miles Michaelis. There's no argument because how are you going to argue it?
Right, absolutely. All right, so, gentlemen,
I still can't hear Elliott. Is he there?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on with all of our audio issues.
Sorry.
I think everybody can hear us, but I don't know that we can all hear each other. Well, at least I know that you two can't necessarily hear each other. So
I can hear Adam.
You can hear Adam. Adam, can you hear Elliott right now? This is fascinating, I'm sure. Elliott, talk.
Test. Hello, world.
Okay. Great. Well, that bodes well for our planned bonus episode. All right. So one of the things that we also wanted to do, and that we're going to try and bring you guys in on, one of the things that we talked about was our predictions for the year, because it's the beginning of the year. So you can't do a beginning of the year show without predictions. So let's quickly run through these. Gentlemen, I'm going to throw out some categories to you, and I can't wait to hear your responses. So let's start with our team Cy Youngs. And because we've got one Cubs fan, one Cardinals fan, and one Cubs fan who's trying to frantically play the middle, I'll give my predictions for both. So we'll start with you, Elliott. Who's your prediction for the Cubs Cy Young this year? Not necessarily that they're going to win the Cy Young.
Right. The team Cy Young. Who do I think is going to not necessarily win the most games, but be the most effective pitcher on the team? God, I want to say it could freaking be any one of these guys this year. Honestly, I mean, you look at last year with Lester starting off with a bomb in Miami, and then he ends up making the All-Star team and winning 18 games last year. Hendricks could do it. I mean, he ended up second in NL Cy Young votes just 2 years ago. and he, I mean, Hendricks could do it. Quintana, I mean, the guy, he has shown flashes of dominance many times. It hasn't been a whole lot with the Cubs, but with the White Sox, he was. I mean, he could. I mean, maybe his comfort level gets way better this year with the team, and he could be a great, he could be a great pitcher. We all know Hamels can do it.
Oh,
I know.
Elliott, shit or get off the pot. Who's your winner?
I'm going to go Lester again this year. I think Lester is. I think he becomes it. I don't want to say you because you has a lot to prove, but I think it's going to be Lester.
All right, throw to you, Mr. Maurer. Cardinals Cy Young winner?
Jack Flaherty.
Really interesting. Why is that?
I mean, if you look at what he did last year, I mean, how he had just such an amazing spring training. Everybody was talking about him. He's filthy with every single pitch that he has. He has that, I mean, dare I say arrogance, but that confidence that you want in your pitcher, like an Arrieta, a Lester, Chris Carpenter, Wainwright. He has that sense that every time he goes on the mound, he's going to get you out. There's just, I mean, he threw 180 plus strikeouts in, I think it was like just barely over 150 innings. And he didn't start for the first month of the season. He's just, honestly, I think he could actually be the Cy Young in the National League this year. If he stays healthy. Absolutely.
All right, well, my turn. I'll go Cardinals first this time, since I'm trying to transition there from you, Adam. I'm going to say Team Cy Young, and this one pains me. It's going to be Jordan Hicks. I think he's going to get the opportunity early on here to lock down the back end, and I think he's going to take to it. And that will actually enable Andrew Miller to ease into the season. And I think that with that growing confidence, you won't be able to dislodge him, especially because it appears that he has found a little something more in spring training and is going to be dangerous. So much as it pains me, my pick for the Cardinals, Jordan Hicks. And then for the Cubs, and I'm going to come back to this one. I think the Cubs Cy Young this year is going to be one Yu Darvish.
I'm just afraid to go that route.
Oh, well, I'll get into why when we move later on. So then we'll move on to the other one that people always seem to be most interested in, because usually when a guy qualifies for this for his team, he's in the discussion for baseball in general, and that's team MVPs. This time I'm going to throw it to you, Adam. Who do you think the Cardinals MVP will be this year?
Did we lose him?
No.
Interesting. Okay, sorry. You lost that there for a second because
I'll dive into it for a minute.
Adam said Molina. No, sorry, Adam. I video cut for a second on my end. Why Yadier Molina?
To be honest, I don't think anybody makes more of a difference in the game than the catcher. I mean, who you're playing that night, who the hitters are, what they're doing, what they like. I don't think anyone trains as hard or knows how Molina does what he does, but I don't think anyone's ever donned a uniform to be able to call a game, to have that confidence, to tell the pitcher to throw a certain pitch at a certain location, even when they know they don't want to. And for the majority of the time, he gets pitchers out of jams. I think that he is the captain, and I think that no matter what he does offensively, the way that he calls the game, he is their general. And I think everybody falls in line behind Molina. I think he is the leader of the Cardinals, always has been after the 06. And, I think he'll continue to be that general as long as he can stay healthy and do 140 to 145 games a year. I don't think anybody makes a bigger impact on the Cardinals than Yadier Molina.
Interesting. All right, Elliott, I'm going to throw over to you here. What do you think? Who's the Cubs MVP this year?
I think it's going to be Javi Baez. I think he is going to pour on to what he did last year. He started to get hot at the end of the spring. He hit 2 homers today, so he's on pace for 342 home runs and 682 RBIs.
Would that be similar? Would that be similar for Wong? Because he hit 2 homers.
Yes, yes, it would be. I think he builds on it. I think he has shown possibly a tad more patience at the plate, even though when bases were loaded today, he swung out of his shoes at the first pitch trying to hit a grand slam.
Well, trying to hit 3 home runs.
Right. He's trying to do the Tuffy Rhodes. So yeah, I think Javi's going to do it, and he's going to do it all over the place. He's going to do it with defense. He's going to do it with his bat, and he's going to do it with a swim move.
All right. Well, I will tell you, for me, this is actually an easy one. I think for the Cardinals, it's going to be Paul Goldschmidt. I think he locks down first base. He provides the kind of steady production that he's provided over the years. He pisses Cubs fans off to no end, whether it's at Wrigley or it's in St. Louis. I think he locks it down and he solidifies the middle of that lineup, despite his, over 3 with 1 walk showing this afternoon. As for the Cubs, Chris Bryant's got a chip on his shoulder the size of Las Vegas, and it's not just because of everybody who said that he can't do it anymore. I think it also has a little bit to do with his buddy getting slighted. I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think that he's going to look to go out and do precisely that. So I think the rest of the National League is on notice. Chris Bryant is, despite his calm, kind, lovely blue-eyed demeanor, I think that Chris Bryant is going to be a monster this year. And you can write that one down, Ron. I'm sure I'll hear about it again later in the
season. I mean, I love those projections from both of you, but I still think that Javier Baez is, honestly, and this pains me as a Cardinal fan to say this, but I think that Javier Baez is probably one of the best players in baseball right now, and very underrated with the fact that he is, like, I think, a better Matt Carpenter, a younger, more talented Matt Carpenter, because he can do so much, but he can damage you with the bat, and he can also take away hits. He's a baller. He's a baller, and I think that he's one of the best at his position in the game.
I got to say, I love hearing that from you,
Adam. Absolutely.
I don't like the Cubs, but you guys have a lot of amazing players, and it's annoying.
Yeah, it was annoying, I'm sure, up until last year. I'm sure last year felt really good when all those amazing players completely forgot how to hit with hitter or runners in scoring position in the second half of the season. So.
Oh, that was fun. Absolutely. A marathon, not a sprint, right? So.
All right. Next up, comeback player of the year. Elliott, who's it going to be for the Cubs?
I think there's only there's 2 people that this could come from. You could look at it from an offensive standpoint, or you could look at it from pitching. I think the most to prove actually is Yu Darvish. I think he can be the comeback player of the year for the Cubs. I would love to see him be the comeback player of for the Cubs this year. But also Chris Bryant, and like you said, huge chip on his shoulder. I mean, he was hurt most of the season. I do think he's going to do a ton of damage this year on offense. But I think the most effective would be you.
Adam, who's making that comeback? Is it your right fielder or your left fielder?
To be honest, it's a coin toss between Ozuna and Reyes. I think Ozuna's done after this year in St. Louis. I think he's going to walk. I think we have plenty of outfielding options to take over and to do whatever Ozuna does, or Fowler, and do the same or not better. Like, say, if we had Steven Piscotty still. But still, Ozuna, he might have a comeback year for him, but the comeback year for the Cardinals, Alex Reyes.
I agree with both of you. I think Alex Reyes is definitely the one who's going to have an impact this year for the Cards. And as I said before, I think he's going to be our Cy Young. I think that Yu Darvish is going to come back and prove that last year had nothing to do with nerves. It had nothing to do with his being soft. It had to do with the fact that he had a legitimate injury, and he's going to look to prove that fact this year. So Reyes for me for the red, and definitely you for the blue. All right, who's going to break out this year, gentlemen? Adam, Who's the player that you're looking forward to making a huge impact in 2019 for the Redbirds?
That's a loaded question. I mean, there's three. I'll name three players who could. One of these three will have the breakout year. I just don't know which one yet. It's going to be Bader in center, Wong at second. I think Wong with Schilt at the helm, more confident. I think you saw a confident Wong swinging the bat today every time he went up there. He wasn't looking to just smack the ball or do anything. I think he was just up there trying to find a good pitch to hit. And when athletes are comfortable in their setting and they're not trying to extend themselves or to do too much or to fight for playing time or to fight for a job, I think it's easier for them to just kind of settle down. So I think that Wong could be that guy for the Cardinals. But at the same time, and this is a caveat, if Fowler gets traded before the halfway mark or at the halfway mark or benched or whatever, hurt, another injury, Tyler O'Neill gets any kind of ample playing time to actually make a difference, I think O'Neill is better than all three of them. I think O'Neill can be, and Ron is probably rolling his eyes somewhere, but I think that O'Neill is the real deal when it comes to making pitchers pay.
Please, as a Cubs fan, give Tyler O'Neill as many at-bats as you want. I will take 30 or 40 home runs from him as long as it's matched with 298 strikeouts. He is the latter-day Adam Dunn, just with better wheels. So
He actually had a pretty good
loads of
spring. He worked on his swing, and he's actually I watched a lot of the spring games. He's worked on his swing with the new hitting coach instructor in St. Louis, Jim Abbott. I mean, he's been or Albert, sorry, but he's been working on his swing and trying to take away bad pitches from the other side. I think. I mean, look, man. I mean, he's not even had a full year in the majors. It takes time for you to develop a comfort zone in your plate appearances.
I can see that. Yeah, actually, I
Yeah.
things. He was kind of Albert's pet project in spring training, wasn't he?
Yes. Well, they were working heavily on, and I'm like, to me, that sends me a sign. Like, I should be paying attention to that, because if Fowler faults at all, I think O'Neill is the next guy. I don't think it's Jose Martinez, because O'Neill is by far the superior defensive player in outfield. And he's got way more power than anyone else. He might not be able to hit 300, but I'd take a 250, 249 average and 30 plus bombs and 80 RBIs or plus. You need that from your right fielder.
Yep. E, who's going to break out for the Cubs this year?
I know probably some people and Cubs fans probably feel that his breakout was last year in David Bodie, but I think that was just a taste. And I feel like he is going to have a solid season this year. He's going to be a huge help to the team, both offensively and defensively. I think it's going to be David Bodie.
All
Do you
right.
think Bodie's going to be the second baseman all year?
I don't think he's going to be the second baseman all year, but I think he's going to force the coaches to make some tough decisions and put him out there, because the guy makes contact with the ball and he scorches it. And it doesn't matter if he's hitting it at people, it's finding holes.
Yeah, he had the third highest exit velocity in baseball last year. So it's just
Yes.
a matter of getting the ball off the ground. For the Cubs, I think the breakout player is going to be somebody who may not actually see the majors this year. And that's young Nico Horner. Starting the year, so he has skipped A-ball entirely. He had, a handful of games at South Bend last year, Elliott, before he got shut down. He the AFL, and he lit up the AFL. He played well in spring training, and they assigned him straight to West 10. Or I'm sorry, not 10. Well, not West 10, Tennessee. Skipping Myrtle Beach entirely, so Ron won't be able to see him in person most likely. But I would be stunned if Nico Horner doesn't end the season at AAA. And if there's a rash of injuries in the middle of the Cubs infield, he could make his debut at Wrigley this year. But I think we are going to hear a lot about Nico Horner this summer.
And there was I think it was Tim Hugh and one of the other Cubs prospect guys last summer say that they think that after spring they said that they wouldn't be surprised if Nico Horner started in Tennessee next year. And those guys were right. Tim Hugh and maybe Evan Altman were two of the guys that had said that. So it's crazy. This kid is good. And I think he's exceeded all expectations so far. And you know who the last person was that had this kind of meteoric rise?
I think he plays left field for the Cubs.
Actually,
with Warburg.
Yeah. When you know how to rake, you shoot up.
Don't say that too loud. Ron's going to come through the internet and choke you to death. As far as breakout player of the year of the Cardinals, yeah, I guess just by default, I'm going to say Tyler O'Neill because he's the one who he did have a cup of coffee last year and he certainly had some big hits, but I don't think he's had nearly the opportunity to showcase himself the way that Harrison Bader has. And so I think I think you're right, Adam. I think that Tyler O'Neill is the guy who's going to open some eyes this year.
Well, and if I may kind of interject with the whole, minor league prospect player, I think that the Cardinals and the Cubs, at least, I don't know anything about Milwaukee because I just don't care. But right, we both found a team that we hate more than each other. I think as of right now. But I mean, Nolan Gorman. I think I mentioned him before last year a few times. Nolan Gorman was drafted at 18 last year in the draft. Went through the draft. 18 other teams had the option of picking him, and for whatever reason, they decided not to. They project him to be the starting third baseman for the Cardinals after Carpenter's contract ends, unless they re-sign Carpenter, which still Gorman can actually shift around to play either a corner position in the outfield or possibly even second base, depending on Colton Wong's contract at that point. But I think we're going to be hearing a lot over this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see Nolan Gorman in call-ups at the end of the year. I think you could see Dylan Carlson and also Nolan Gorman. Keep them on your radar because those guys, all they do is hit. They just break. And those guys make it to the big leagues quick.
All right. Last one here. Who's going to be the biggest disappointment, Adam?
Dexter Fowler.
Really? No faith in Dex.
Okay, look, I have nothing against Dexter Fowler and what happened to him on Twitter last year and dealing with a whole bunch of other things off the field and as well as on the field. I don't care in this regard. It's not that I don't care about him as a human being. I don't care when it comes to being a professional athlete, making the kind of money that he's making. He's never going to live up to the contract that he signed, unfortunately, unless he drops 20-plus home runs for the next 3 years. He's not going to be able to live up to it because everyone behind him can do just as good a job defensively and absolutely better offensively. So I don't care about Dexter Fowler anymore in a Cardinal uniform. It was fun for a minute. He had a good season in his first year. Last year was just one of the worst seasons you've ever seen a professional player have, except maybe a Chris Davis. But still, I don't think that Fowler's going to be able to live up to the expectations that he sets on himself and his contract.
Who's going to be the disappointment for the Cubs?
Well, it's funny because it could also be the same person who I picked as Cy Young, and it could be John Lester.
Oh, wow.
So that is both the good and the bad because he's 36, and his peripherals have shown that he's being hit harder, even though that it hasn't seen the results that you typically would for a pitcher who has declined the way that he kind of has the last 2 years or so. It could catch up this year. So,
all right, for me, Cubs biggest disappointment. I think it's going to be Addison Russell. And I don't know if that's going to be because of his performance on the field or because he is going to fail to live up to the expectations that the Cubs have set for him. And he won't be called up because they don't feel that he's making the progress that they wanted to see in his personal life and in his off-field carriage. But I think that Addison Russell is going to end up being the biggest disappointment. And I think the biggest frustration for Cubs fans because his presence or lack thereof is going to hover over the entire start of the Cubs season and could very well linger there throughout the season.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Pete, can I ask you a question about
Sure.
that? So, do you feel like there's a cross between Fowler and Addison Russell? Clearly, they're different players, but would you say it's an addition by subtraction if they're not in the lineup or on the roster? Like you have David Bowyer, you can always fall back to Ian Happ if necessary. After he gets his bats, you can keep Javier Baez at short.
Yeah.
Would you say it's an addition by subtraction if he maybe say he doesn't play all this year?
I'll answer for myself, and Elliott, obviously, I'm going to want you to weigh in here too. I'll tell you what, Adam, for me, if you look at Addison Russell as he performed in 2016, you would take that guy every single season. Gold Glove caliber defense and a solid, 6-7 hole hitter who was capable of getting incredibly hot and flash the potential to possibly reach, 30 home runs a season at his peak. Even the last year and a half, when he wasn't delivering at the plate, he was still delivering stellar defense at shortstop. And as he demonstrated when he first came up and he deferred to the presence of Starlin Castro at shortstop, he's still capable of playing a solid second base as well. And I am absolutely one for giving people a second chance. I think that has been very clear throughout this offseason that I think that the guy deserves an opportunity to either rise and fall on his own merits. But yeah, I think just from a distraction standpoint, I think it almost could benefit the Cubs to have him gone simply because it would be a resolution to the situation. And it wouldn't be that distraction of when's Addison coming up. And then when he does come up, how is he going to be welcomed by the team? How is he going to be welcomed by Cubs fans? How is he going to be treated by teams at Elliott?
Sorry.
Opposing teams' fans at away games. I think those are all big questions that are going to be hovering over his column. And I almost think that it might benefit the team, particularly if they get off to a hot start, to not have to deal with him.
Yeah. You almost didn't notice him very much this spring. I think during split squad games, he was at the other game, not being either broadcast or on TV. And he would take the spot of Mark Zagunis, who has shown to, earn his spot on the team. And I'd like to give that guy a chance. And the team seems to be meshing well in not having that distraction right now. I really don't care if he fades off into oblivion. Honestly, I know that's not going to be the case because the front office has, made their bed and that they're going to support him as long as he keeps doing the things that they ask him to do. And, if he does keep doing it, okay. Will I be disappointed if he continues to work on it? Yes and no. I mean, no, because he's trying to become a better person, but yes, because I really don't want him on this team.
Oh, you don't want him on the team?
No, I don't think any Cubs fan really wants him on the team. I mean,
this brings a bigger question to us into the arena that we're setting. I mean, we're talking about professional sports. Yes, it's baseball, but you look at football, you look at all these domestic violent cases, and I mean, you look at Greg Hardy, you look at Kareem Hunt. You look at all these guys who get suspended or they get another opportunity if they're young. But if you're a little bit older, like say 29, 30, like a Ray Rice, had Ray Rice still been productive and not in his late 20s or early 30s, he absolutely would have kept playing football. Like somebody would have taken him. And I think that it sends a bad message to everyone growing up playing the sport where, like, it just takes me back to high school and college when, playing with a lot of these guys around here who know that they're good and they're talented, but they don't have a good head on their shoulders. They think that talent will take them through their entire life. And I think it's bullshit. I think that if you're going to have, like, somebody get into an accident or, beat a woman flagrantly, and I feel like, look, did Pete Rose get a second chance from doing what he did? How many guys actually get a second opportunity now? It's almost like a handout. It's almost like a hall pass. Here you go. As long as you don't screw up again and you keep performing, you're all good. I think it sends a very bad message to our children, to our sport, and I think it makes the league look bad. I feel like
and all Pete Rose did was bet on himself. I said, and all Pete Rose did was bet on himself, and he has been banned from baseball, unlike some of these other guys who should.
It's not like he went out and got drunk and beat a woman senseless like Greg Hardy or Ray Rice. It doesn't make sense to me. It's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I think it sends a bad message all across the way, all across the board. It's terrible.
We'll have to get into this some other time because we are coming up on the end of our allotted time, at least for this first part of the show. I would love to have you back on, Adam, to discuss that because I think that we could get into a fascinating episode just talking about integrity of the game and who does and does not deserve second chances. I know that Ron has some pretty strong opinions on that as well, and you can tell by Elliott's pained look anytime that the Addison Russell topic comes up. That he obviously has some thoughts about it too. And just to wrap things up, as far as my biggest disappointment for the St. Louis Cardinals this year, obviously it's going to be the St. Louis.
Love it.
That was too easy.
So.
Hey, Adam, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online if they want to follow you and give everyone a quick update on the Grail.
Thank you. Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at Adam J. Maurer, and then you can find me on Instagram at the Adam Maurer, Maurer. But so the movie's done. We've gotten it off. We're talking to a couple of distribution companies. Hopefully purchasing the film. We did get into a film festival and win an award at the Indie Film Fest Film Awards. That was really cool. We're going to DTLA Film Festival later this year in September, the end of September. I believe from the 26th to the 3rd. And that's DTLA, the Downtown Los Angeles Film Festival at LA Live. But it's doing well. It's getting around, and I'm actually working on my next project right now and finishing up another script. But everything's going good. It's just slow. Everything feels like it goes too slow, to be honest.
It feels like we've been talking about this since this podcast started.
It's been a while.
Very cool. All right. Well, when we're not live on Facebook at Team of Rivals Podcast, you can find us online at teamofrivalspodcast.com. We're on Twitter at Team of Rivals Pod and on Instagram at Team of Rivals Podcast. You can contact us by email at the show at teamofrivalspodcast.com. On Twitter, you can find Elliott at
TOR_Elliott.
You can find Brecklyn studying for LSATs, but when she's not doing that, you can find her at Carry On Cards, Carry spelled C-A-R-E-Y, because it's a pun. If you're listening to us after the fact, why not give Radio Public a try? Radio Public's a free platform that throws a couple of pennies our way every time you listen. Otherwise, you can catch us anywhere you listen to podcasts, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, and Google Podcasts. And obviously, we're not broadcasting to you, our faithful listeners. We're asking you to spread the word with your friends. Tell them to give us a listen. And of course, if you would like some of your own Team of Rivals gear, don't forget to visit the team store on Zazzle. Just don't buy soft goods. Elliott, Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Good start to the beginning of the year. Offense looked good. Pitching looked great. Lots of patience at the plate. Good to see. First game. I know, small sample size. It's going to be exciting. Loved the way that Brewers Cardinals game ended. I was so conflicted on who I wanted to not cheer for. So, yeah, I'm glad baseball's back. It's going to be a fun year.
And now we have the most ridiculous day in baseball each year. Day 2 off. So,
no, Cardinals and Brewers play tomorrow.
Oh, that's good because
they play tomorrow night. Yep.
One stinking game. Feel like Bob Uecker. All right. Before we sign off, just a reminder, I think we may have alluded to it a little bit. I know we did in the post. If you're anything of a comics fan, you're going to want to stick around. We're going to put together a little bonus episode here. We're going to keep the camera rolling, but if not, you can always download the bonus episode later. We're going to talk DC versus Marvel. What Marvel has gotten right and what DC has gotten wrong. And obviously, Adam's experience as a filmmaker, somebody who's out in Hollywood, is going to be invaluable, and you're going to want to hear his theory on that. So be sure to stick around. But before we go, one final thought, something interesting that I caught last night and that I wanted to share, especially in light of recent events. Read this last night. A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. He who finds one finds a treasure. A faithful friend is beyond price. No sum can balance his worth. We're thinking of you as always, Ron. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. We will talk to you next time.
Love you, Ron.
All right. Just as Elliott leaves the room.
The integrity.
Bringing a little Avengers theme song, and Elliott just walks away. That's so great. Elliott, come back. Well, I at least had a good lead in, but Adam.
Yes, sir.
This got inspired a little bit by a back and forth that I assume you and Elliott had when you expressed your excitement for Shazam. I haven't read much about it, but I will admit I am looking forward to it in a way I haven't looked forward to a DC film since the Dark Knight trilogy. And then you and Elliott went back and forth. Elliott saying that DC needed to get more of these movies right, and that DC fans have to be clamoring for more what Marvel has done with the EU. And you agreed, saying that you have a theory why Marvel is doing this better than DC is. So please enlighten us, Mr. Filmmaker. What is Marvel doing right that DC's doing wrong?
Their setup. Everything is with their setup. I mean, if you look at before any of the Avengers, I mean, my God, what are we on, like the 4th or 5th Avenger movie? They did everything correct in the sense of setting it up. I mean, if you go back to the beginning of Marvel, not the beginning, like the 90s, 80s comics and first bad 90s movies that we all watched, but if you go back and you look at Robert Downey Jr. coming on with Jon Favreau to do Iron Man, it was a low budget, was never expected to do anything, and it shocked the world. Here was a comic book story turned into a cinematic story, but it wasn't too dark and it wasn't too hokey or corny. It kind of leveled out. It played the balance. And in my opinion, from my understanding and my research, Marvel allows, or Disney, I should say, who owns Marvel and also just got the rights to Fox, to be able to bring more characters into the universe. But everybody who makes comic books and works on this in the Marvel is very involved in the creation and the collaboration of telling these stories cinematically and kind of help guide everyone in what direction to go. And DC doesn't. I think DC, with Zack Snyder. I think Christopher Nolan got the ball rolling because, I mean, if you look at the Batman, and I love the original Batman with Michael Keaton. That's my favorite Batman. However, if you look at everything else, it started with Christopher Nolan with Batman Begins. It was an amazing film, but he had such a specific vision, tone, setting. It was his version. I mean, even Zack Snyder enlisted Christopher Nolan to helping him with, Superman Returns. I mean, not Superman, but I mean, they tried to imitate and recreate what only Christopher Nolan can do.
So you think
if you
that's
think
what
about it?
That's what the problem has been with DC is that they're trying to make everything dark, and darkness is not personal to the filmmakers, and so they can't pull it off because I guess they don't believe in it. Whereas with Christopher Nolan,
no, Warner Brothers has a set schedule. They have everything set up. Like Warner Brothers owns DC. Right. There is no creative collaboration between the people who work on the DC comics and the DC universe and Warner Brothers. They hire their own writers. They don't work together. There's no communication.
Oh,
this is our story. We're going to do it ourselves, and that to me pisses me off because it's like you look at what Marvel did with the launch of Iron Man, and then they started doing these individual movies, and then all of a sudden you have, if you look at all the movies that led up to the first Avengers, how many individual successful stories did they tell? And even Captain America wasn't great. The first Avenger, that wasn't a great movie, but it did serve its purpose, knowing that the Avengers was coming, and then everything else tailspin. But you have all these multiple stories in this universe that they were telling before they got to the Avengers. And then Warner Brothers like, hey, look at what they're doing. We just need to go do a Batman Superman movie because we already did Superman. And instead of having these individual stories that lead into telling the bigger story, like I was entertained, but I was disappointed with Justice League.
Absolutely. And I feel like DC has been a little too campy compared to the way that Marvel has done it. I don't know if you feel that way too, Adam, but kind of going back to what you were saying, the best individual film before the first Avengers movie, in my opinion, it was that first Iron Man. Thor was the first Thor movie was okay. And then what was the other one that they did right before Avengers came out? The Captain America First Avenger. You could tell that Thor and Captain America they weren't quite as on par with what Jon Favreau did with Iron Man. But after that first Avengers movie, they really put the effort into those next individual stories, and they really put some money behind it. I felt like where it increased the quality of those films as they expanded that universe and introduced more secondary characters that would eventually become more main characters.
You know what it is, man? It's time. It's planning. It's having the right people in the right places. Because if you look at it, whenever you watch a Marvel movie, like I just took my kids to go see Captain Marvel a couple of weeks ago, and we stayed until the very end just to see everything because it's a
right.
movie. It's a comic thing. You want to see what leads into it because Marvel does that so well that if you don't stay into the end, you might miss something.
You might miss that post-credit scene that they're going to call back to in maybe 2 more movies or the next more movie or whatever it is.
That all lands on Kevin Feige's desk, right? He's the one who's sitting there and he's plotting everything.
Yes, and it's interesting.
Like they all work together. I mean, like I watched the behind the scenes on the I think it was the latest Avengers movie, and it was talking about the lead executive and it wasn't him. It was another guy who works with him and everyone else. And they look, man, they collaborate. They work together. They don't they don't just say, hey, here's a suggestion, or like, hey, they go to Mike Matheny's desk, they're like, hey, we think you should use this picture, and he's like, I think I know better than you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've admired about Marvel films is that they haven't tried to impose that template on all the films that DC has done. Where the DC films have all, for the most part, been pretty darn dark. And that's actually why I'm looking forward to Shazam, is because it looks silly. It doesn't look
Yeah.
like the other ones. Whereas the Marvel movies, they are not all the same. Ant-Man is straight up a heist movie. It's very different from Iron Man, from any of the Captain Americas, from Thor. Like each one has their own feel. And I mean, Ragnarok was like
Yes.
nothing. It's like no other Marvel film, but they're allowing that to happen, and it doesn't feel like DC and Warner Bros. Well, take it away from DC, as you mentioned. It doesn't feel like Warner Brothers is allowing that to happen at all. It's like our films are going to be dark and gritty, and we are going to treat these as real human beings, and that's how the film's going to be.
And they don't tie anything in. I mean, if you look at all these, even Ragnarok, everything ties in to the next movie. Like they all somehow mesh together. In DC, it's like everything's a Christopher Nolan aesthetic feel, and then all the dialogue and the acting is very Kevin Smith kind of feel. You know what I mean? It doesn't match what you're trying to do, and that creates a problem.
Well, I watched a behind the scenes with Kevin Feige, and he had said that after the Iron Man film, because they weren't sure how critics and how the public were going to take Iron Man, and so they added that post-credit for Iron Man after the testing, because they're like, holy shit, people really like this. We better, let them know that, hey, we're going to do another Iron Man. And he said that, so after that movie, he got with the Russo brothers, he got with the comic book writers, Stan Lee, and he's like, we sat in a room for weeks planning everything out to Endgame. He's like, every single film that we knew we were going to do, he's like, it was all planned out. He's like, we were in there for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, putting these stories together, putting these tie-ins together. He's like, a lot of it was taken from the comics. He's like, but we had all these writers collaborating and just throwing all these ideas around. And he's like, how unbelievable and how big of a project. I mean, it blows my mind when he was talking about that. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that DC's just taking these out slices, and they're like, okay, so let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And they're doing it without figuring out how to really tie those together very, very tightly, as Marvel has.
Yeah, DC is very cookie cutter.
Yes. I mean, between Suicide Squad and the Batman vs Superman, and I know they were trying to tie some stuff together in there, but seriously, unless you were deep into like the DC lore and deep into the DC story, there were some things that happened in Batman vs Superman that I'm a pretty big comic book fan, and I was mostly Marvel, but there was some stuff in that movie where I was like, what? Like, what's going on? I don't, what is that? That's referring back to something, but they haven't introduced any of that stuff. So it was very.
Oh, that was in the previous movie they never made.
Right.
Yeah. Apparently.
Adam, what is it about Shazam that has you excited?
To be honest, it reminds me of, I don't want to name a specific Marvel movie, but it reminds me of any standalone Marvel movie, although it plays to more of a comedic point, as opposed to, it's very comic book. It's like when you read DC or Marvel, it's like Stan Lee, and they always had that kind of hokey, like, good guys do good, and sometimes it's hard to struggle as the hero when you have dark thoughts yourself, and then DC and everyone's just like, hey, let's go all in on the dark, and let's play it this way. But Shazam it looked like a movie that I would want to see, that I would buy into it, that I would care about it, and it feels like it could be a franchise where they could make 3 of these movies, and I would probably go and watch every single one of them as long as I like the first one. And this is the first thing I think that they've done right in a long time, because they're developing something that has nothing to do with Kingdom Come or wherever the hell they're taking Justice League to or whatever they're doing. This has its own, and I mean, they have their own issues at Warner Brothers with DC because of Gal Gadot, and it's like, I'm not going to do the next Wonder Woman movie at that. It's like Marvel already had all their people tied down. They had their actors tied down. They had an idea on who was going to write it. They had an idea of who's on the short list to direct it. I mean, they had their P's and Q's lined up, and DC is just like, well, if you think about it, we're not quite there yet, but when we do, we'll go ahead and go with that. There's no proper planning, and there's a huge lack of execution. I think that I feel like this is a throwaway for DC. I don't think that they put as much into it, and I think that might be a good thing for them, because Shazam looks like an entertaining movie for all ages, and I think that people will buy back into what DC is going to do.
Sorry about that. My bad.
That's okay.
I think Shazam, what really interesting, I mean, I really like the lead actor. I forget, Zach. I think his name is.
Zach Levi.
Thank you, Zach Levi. I mean, and I watched his show for a long time. But he's a really cool guy. He's a talented actor, and I think that this could launch its own universe for Shazam. And I think that this could be something that could really, really work and bounce for them. But I don't believe that DC is going to take that and utilize that going forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it has a real. This movie feels to me like big. Like, I mean, it's. I think it's gonna be awesome, and I really like Zachary Levi. I think he's I used to watch his TV show. Plus, he's also kind of he's a nerdy guy. He runs his he runs his website for video games and things like that. So I think it's right up his alley.
Absolutely.
Since we're on the topic, did you guys see the second Captain Marvel? Since obviously Shazam is the first Captain Marvel. Did you guys see Captain Marvel?
Yes,
I did. Yeah.
What did you guys think?
I thought it was good. I thought it was a good introduction to the character. Definitely not one of the best Marvel films. And I know they've rebooted this character a few times in the comics, but I thought it was solid. So I thought it was a good movie. So it was great to see some of the backstory with Phil Coulson and Nick Fury. I thought that was pretty cool. And the 90s nostalgia was just, it was awesome.
Yeah, that part. I mean, it took me a minute to realize what was going on, where we were, but as soon as I saw Coulson and Fury, and that he had both of his eyes, it was like, like immediately in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, we're gonna learn what happened to his eye. And if you watch the movie, you know exactly what happened to his eye, and it's brilliant. Like that. That's one of my favorite kind of like geek moments, if you will, because it was always curious as to like how that happened.
Yeah. And the post credits didn't disappoint either.
Yeah, it was a really good movie, and I think that they went this way for a lot of reasons. I mean, Captain Marvel is a female, so you're already gaining a new avenue of fan base of kids growing up. Like even my daughter was the one and she's 8 years old. She's the one who wanted to go see it, and then my son's like, he loves everything Marvel. He's like, I want to go see it. My wife, of course, and I'm like, I love Marvel, so it was kind of just, there was no questions about it that we wanted to go see this movie. And I think that, again, this is Marvel taking another step forward. And if you pay attention to the stop signs, they said that this is going to be the new universe of moving forward. Like Brie Larson was taking over Captain Marvel, knowing that after Endgame, Marvel's kind of done for a bit because nobody else is signed on to do movies. Robert Downey said that he's not going to do anymore. Chris Evans is, wanting to direct, so he's stepping away. He said, never say never, but he said he's not going to be doing any Captain America anytime soon. Chris Hemsworth is also stepping away from the Thor. So, I mean, this opens up a whole new level for Marvel to show secondary and even third, characters within the Marvel universe through Captain Marvel.
Well, it would seem to be that the new Avengers are going to obviously be Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Spider-Man, and Ant. It seems those are going to be kind of the primary four.
But look, they're ending their first segment with the main Avengers, and now they're creating another universe. Not another universe, but within the same universe that they've already built. But they are so leaps and bounds ahead of DC. And it's like, at one point, I live right down the street from Warner Brothers. You know how many times I want to go up there and be like, what are you guys doing? You guys have this much money. You're spending this much money. How are you guys not communicating to making the best product possible? You really don't care about the long game. You're just, and again, Warner Brothers, from my, understanding and the contacts I have within there, is they have not made a profit in like a decade. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to get tax evasion? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, Kevin Feige has done it right with the different phases, and this is Endgame is the end of phase 4, and then Spider-Man Far From Home is the beginning of phase 5, I believe, where you're introducing new enemies and Mysterio, and I'm sure there's a few others in there, and then I believe there's the Eternals. Then there's the Black Widow standalone movie that they're also doing. So I believe she's staying, Scarlett Johansson. And then you're right. Then you got Black Panther. You've got Ant-Man and the Wasp. And then you've got some other characters that they haven't even introduced yet that they've talked about, that maybe you've caught in the end of Guardians of the Galaxy, if you know what I'm talking about. I don't know if I don't want to be spoilerish.
No, you're good.
So isn't it the character's Adam, isn't it? Isn't that the character's name?
Yes.
That they've kind of hinted at. What's that? Yeah, exactly. So
that doesn't know, but I mean.
Right, and then and then I think Sebastian Stan is actually staying on, who could possibly become and take up the mantle of the next Captain America. So because in the comics, I believe the Winter Soldier, if Captain America dies, he takes up his mantle or his shield. So, but there's also a version where Falcon takes up that shield too. So he could be, Anthony Mackie could be sticking around and taking that up. So I don't know. Yeah, I can't wait for Endgame to see how everything plans out.
In Endgame?
Yes.
I think Captain America's dead.
Yes, I do too.
I think that they may keep Tony Stark around so that Robert Downey Jr. can play the why am I suddenly blanking on it?
Kind of like the new Nick Fury.
No, not the new Nick Fury. I think that Tony Stark becomes the cameo appearance in every film. Jesus, why can't I remember his name? The guy
Stan Lee.
Stan Lee, thank you. My God. Yeah,
who it's theorized that he's actually a Watcher, a part of a race called the Watchers, who are everywhere.
So I mean, I think that's the role that he plays, is he becomes kind of that cameo that you're looking for in every film to see where it is that Tony Stark turns up for 5 minutes and 3 lines.
Well, I mean, and it was nice to see Stan Lee and Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
I don't know, but is he going to be in Endgame? Did they film that scene?
I don't. He was alive during filming. I don't know if they filmed that cameo or not. He had one in.
I'm going to think they didn't film it for Endgame simply because of how heavy the tributes were to Stan for Captain Marvel. You know, he was the Marvel logo at the opening. It was all of his appearances and his comments and everything. They dedicated.
It might be a long tribute, man. I think that
right.
You'll see the same thing in Endgame. I think.
Yeah,
you're right. It could. If they've recorded it, you're absolutely right. It could be a long tribute for all the films this year, because obviously they still have Endgame and they've got Spider-Man.
Yeah,
so
and he had a great one in Into the Spider-Verse too. I thought that was an awesome cameo as well.
Yeah, that's the best Marvel movie so far this year.
Can I ask you something? Did you guys see the remake, or not the remake, but the second movie to Tron?
Yeah.
Do you think now they made Jeff Bridges look really young, and they did the same thing when Paul Walker died for Fast and Furious.
Right.
And they used his brother.
Well, they used his brother. However, they also did a green screen dots on his face to make it
right. Yep.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, because they used the same thing in Guardians of the Galaxy with what's his name
and a 3D in the future.
I don't think so. I think there's too much respect for his legacy and for him.
Yeah.
That they'll do that. Obviously we saw it in Rogue One.
Wait, but do you think that's disrespectful if they do that to keep him throughout all of the Marvel movies?
I don't know that I feel it's disrespectful, but who knows? They may think it. They may not even want to do it.
No, but as a fan, because we're all fans here, so as a fan, I'm just asking your opinion as a fan for both of you, Elliott and Pete. Would you say that would be disrespectful in keeping his torch kind of going throughout the ages, given that we have the technology?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on how they use it and how they do it. His cameo is always, a humorous Tony Stank. Tony got a letter for Tony Stank. I don't know. I guess it really depends on how they use it. I mean, if they're going to use it for like a short little 5-second thing, and then I think it might be okay, but it's got to be done. It's got to be done really good.
Like a quick 3D,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just, for one, like, I'm saddened that he's gone. I mean, that was a guy that I always wanted to meet, and I did get to meet him at a comic book convention long ago, and it was the coolest. He's the nicest freaking guy you would ever. Like, you literally have ushers ushering you away as soon as you get an autograph. It's like you have to,
They have to do it, otherwise he'll sit there and talk to you.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's fantastic.
That's too funny.
All right. Well, we'll have to revisit this then after we've all had a chance to see Shazam, and maybe we can get Ron to crawl out of his hidey hole and join us for it. Adam, thanks for staying on for so long. Thanks for joining us tonight on short notice, and we'll definitely have to do this again. We'll put you in the rotation of the permanent guest hosts until Ron gets back here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love it.
Excellent. Elliott, thanks
all right
for staying on. Anybody who, obviously there's nobody sticking around watching it.
Oh, we got one watcher now.
We got one back. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. You caught us just in time to sign off. And obviously we'll cut this and we'll throw it up as a bonus episode on the Team Arrivals feed in the next day or so. So thanks everyone, and have a great week.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.